Hi everyone, it's Rachel, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make your very own decorated waffle cone charms using polymer clay. These designs are super fun, plus you can change up the colours and the toppings to also suit your own style. I do have another video where I show you how to create some more simple designs, so if you are a beginner or this is your first time making a polymer clay ice cream, I suggest you check out that video first, which I'll leave linked down in the description box below. Alright, so I'm beginning by making the cones for my ice cream. The colour that I'm going to be using is Vanilla by Fimo. I'm just taking my clay rolling pin and I'm rolling this clay down onto my work surface to make a flat sheet. Next, I'm going to be adding the texture to the waffle cones, and I like to use this square kind of texture on this plastic plate. I'm also going ahead and taking some corn flour, which I just keep in this little cup, and this will prevent the clay from sticking to the paper plate. So here I'm just rubbing the corn flour all over the sheet of clay, and then I just flip the clay over to the side with the corn flour and I placed it onto the plate. Then you can take your rolling pin and roll this down to get the texture onto the clay, and it is okay if your clay sticks to the rolling pin like mine did here, because it still works out. I'm then taking this large round cookie cutter and pressing it into the clay and then pulling away the excess. Next, it's time to add some shading to our vanilla coloured clay to make it look a little bit more cooked and like a real waffle cone. So I'm using a fluffy paintbrush and my mixture of brown chalk pastels, which I just have shaved into this little cup, and I'm just lightly dusting this over top of the clay. Then using my long blade, I'm actually going to cut the circle into quarters. Now we want to shape our clay into the waffle cones, so to help me do this I'm actually taking my piping tip and I'm wrapping 1/4 of the circle around the very end and then just pinching the sides together to secure them. So that's what my waffle cone currently looks like. Then you can remove it from the piping tip if that's what you use to help you shape it, and also go ahead and create the others as well. If you find that your cones lose some of their colour from you touching the clay and just trying to blend it together, you can of course just brush on some more of the chalk pastel shavings. So once I've created my waffle cones, I'm then going ahead and baking these in my oven just for 5 minutes to harden them a little, and this will make the clay a lot easier to work with. So here are what my waffle cones look like. You can see that I made a few other batches as well. And then once they've been baked, it's time to begin creating the ice cream. So to make the ice cream for my waffle cones, I'm going to be using my star piping tip, which is a Wilton number 16. If you don't have a piping tip that you can use with clay, I do have a tutorial on other ways you can create frosting using polymer clay. So I'll leave a link to that video down below if you would like to check it out. So this chocolate deco ice cream is the first design I'm going to be showing you how to make in this video. I firstly took some corn flour and I'm just going to rub this all over the surface of my clay so that when I push it through the piping tip it doesn't stick to the sides. To create the chocolate ice cream I'm using this darker brown polymer clay called Chocolate by Sculpey. So here I'm just simply dropping the clay into my piping tip, and then I'm using a large ball tool to push the clay through the end until I've pretty much pushed out enough to create my swirl of ice cream. I then used my blade to trim it off on an angle, and here I'm just taking some Sculpey Bacon Bond liquid clay and I'm pouring this into the side of my ice cream cone. I'm then actually taking a piece of scrap clay which I'm placing inside the waffle cone, and this will just help to give me something to wrap the ice cream around and also make sure that it's not hollow inside the charm. For now you can go ahead and put this clay to the side, and next we're going to be making a chocolate sauce to create a dipped waffle cone look. You want to take some liquid clay. I've chosen to go with Sculpey Bacon Bond just because it's nice and thick, plus you'll also want some chalk pastels or some other powdered pigments to colour the liquid clay. I scraped in some chalk pastel shavings and I mixed it all together, adjusting the colour until I was happy with it. Then you can take your waffle cone and add the liquid clay around the top of the cone, and it is okay if some goes onto that scrap piece of clay because it's going to be covered up in just a moment with the ice cream anyway. I'm then taking my chocolate coloured clay and I'm adding this to the waffle cone. When I make my waffle cones, I like to put the end of the coil at the back of the charm where the join is on the cone, and then I just begin wrapping it all the way around until I get to the top. When I get to the very end of the clay, I like to pinch the end to make it look like it has just come out of a soft serve machine, and then that's pretty much just how you make the ice cream part. I then wanted the chocolate sauce to look like it had some nuts spread around on it, so I took my little pre-cut pieces of tan coloured clay and I just positioned these onto the liquid clay. To make these little nuts, all I did was bake a few shades of beige and tan coloured clay, and then I just cut them up into fine little pieces. I mostly use this on my clay charms as sand, but it also works really well for little crushed nut pieces. Now it's time to begin making the little deco pieces that we're going to be adding onto the waffle cone. So beginning with the donut, I took some tan coloured clay and then I just pressed this down on my work surface. I then used my needle tool to create a hole in the centre, and I added on a brown piece of clay, and then I had to remake that hole again in the centre, and this time I used a larger dotting tool. Next, you'll want to add some shading, so you can dust on some of your brown chalk pastel mixture or other powdered pigments using a fluffy paintbrush. Then I rolled a thin coil of white clay and I just curled this onto the donut to kind of look like a swirl of frosting. I also then had to trim off a small part of the donut, and this would give me a flat surface to work with where I could add it onto the ice cream. Next, we had the little chocolate macaron. So to make this, I took some dark brown polymer clay and I flattened the clay down on the end of my rolling pin, and I did that so that I could easily move it around and give it the texture. To add the texture to the sides of the macaron, I used my needle tool and I just very gently swirled the sides of the clay. I made 2 of these, and then I also took a lighter brown clay for the center, and then I just added the top of the macaron on to finish it off. Lastly, to create a strawberry, I used some dark pink polymer clay and I shaped it into a little cone, and then here I'm just adding some little indents using a small dotting tool, and that's to make it look like it has some seeds. I then also just cut up some small pieces of green clay, which I'll be adding on for the leaves. Of course, then it's time to put it all together, so here you can just see I'm positioning on all the little pieces and attaching them on. Finally, you can go ahead and add an eye pin if you would like to make it into a charm, and then you can bake it in your oven according to your package's instructions. So this next design I'm going to be showing you is this kind of glittery pink lemonade inspired design. Again, I'm starting with my corn flour and I'm just rubbing this onto a piece of pink coloured polymer clay, which I've prepared for the ice cream. I popped this clay into my piping tip and then I just pushed it through the end and cut off the excess using my blade. Next, I added some liquid clay into the cone, and I added a small piece of scrap clay so that the charm wouldn't be hollow and that the ice cream would have something to attach to. I decided that I also wanted to make this one kind of have like a dripping sauce going down the cone, so I've poured some Sculpey Bacon Bond onto a sheet of baking paper, and then I'm just scraping in some white and a small amount of pink chalk pastel shavings. I'm mixing the colours into the liquid clay, and then I just went ahead and added this to the waffle cone. This time I tried to shape it a little bit more so that it looked like it was dripping. I attached the end of the pink ice cream to the very back of the charm, and then I just wrapped it all the way around until I got to the very top. Next, I positioned on 2 lemon cane slices for decoration. These ones that I have here are store-bought, but cane slices can also be made yourself. I'm just personally not very good at making clay canes. To create the little leaves, you can simply pinch a piece of green clay and then just make an indent down the center. You can then also position these onto the ice cream. Lastly, I'm adding on a few areas of regular translucent liquid Sculpey, and this is going to help the glitter stick onto the clay. You can then go ahead and add an eye pin if you'd like to make it into a charm, and then bake it in your oven according to your package's instructions. This next design I'm showing you how to make is a mixture of lots of different flavours all together, and I know it's very random. I don't know if I would particularly order this one myself, but I do know that I really like the look of it in a clay version. So for the ice cream, I'm using a light purple clay, and then here I'm just rolling it into my cone shape and then rubbing it with some corn flour. I placed the clay into my piping tip and then I just pushed it through the end with my large ball tool. Next, I'm taking my Sculpey Bacon Bond and I'm pouring some inside the waffle cone to help attach my piece of scrap clay. For the dipped waffle cone on this design, I decided to go with a light blue. So here I'm mixing in some white and blue chalk pastel shavings into my liquid clay, and then I'm just adding this around the top of the cone. Again, it doesn't matter if it goes on the scrap clay because we are going to be adding the ice cream onto it anyway. I'm then attaching the end of the ice cream onto the back of the charm, and then I'm wrapping this piece of clay all around the scrap clay and twirling it as I go. When I got to the very top, I trimmed off the excess and then I pinched the end of the clay to create a little point. Then it was time to make the purple, I guess, kind of grape sauce to go on top of the ice cream for decoration. So I mixed a dark purple chalk pastel into some Sculpey Bacon Bond, which I chose to use because it's much thicker and I wanted to be able to kind of shape it and control it a bit more. Then I just added this to the top of the soft serve and I made it look like it was dripping down the sides. Next up, it was time for the decorations. The first thing I'm showing you how to make is the little waffle piece. So I pressed some vanilla colored clay down onto my plastic plate, which I used at the start of the video, and then I just shaded it using my fluffy paintbrush and I cut it to size with my blade and also a round cookie cutter. Next up we have the little Oreo biscuit, and this one's pretty simple. So I just flattened down 2 pieces of black clay and 1 piece of white clay, and then it was pretty much just a matter of adding them all together and positioning the Oreo on top of the waffle cone. To create the pretzel, I rolled a thin coil of brown clay and then I just did my best to curl the ends into the center and shape it pretty much just into a pretzel kind of shape. It's pretty simple, and again I'm just positioning this into the purple grape sauce. For some extra details, I'm also adding some of those little nut pieces, and again I'm just using my pre-baked and chopped up clay. And then to the blue sauce around the cone, I'm adding some rainbow sprinkles, which are also just pre-cut pieces of polymer clay as well. Finally, add an eye pin if you'd like to make it into a charm, and then you can bake it in your oven according to your package's instructions. And the final design I'm going to be showing you how to make in this video is this very extra looking rainbow decorated ice cream. So here I'm starting off by adding my liquid clay into the cone, and then I'm adding my little piece of scrap clay. Next it's time to make the rainbow ice cream. So I firstly prepared my rainbow colours of clay and then I rolled them all into long teardrop shapes. Then here I'm just combining them all together in a rainbow order and shaping them into a cone kind of shape, which will fit into the piping tip. Once I've done that, I took my corn flour and I'm just rubbing this onto the surface of the clay so that it doesn't stick to the sides of the metal piping tip. Like all the other soft serve ice creams, I just pushed this clay through and I trimmed off the excess clay as well. Before I added the soft serve to the cone, I created the chocolate sauce. So I mixed together my liquid clay and also some brown and black chalk pastel shavings. Then it was time to go ahead and begin wrapping the soft serve around that piece of scrap clay, twirling the clay as I went, and then I also had some excess clay at the very top, which I just trimmed off, and then I pinched the very end to make it into a point. For the sauce that's going to be going on top, I actually took this white liquid Sculpey so I didn't have to add any extra colorings with my chalk pastel shavings, and then I just squeezed this straight onto the clay from the bottle. So I poured some on the very top, and then I also used my dotting tool to be a little bit more precise and make it look like it was dripping down the ice cream. Next we are up to the decorations. So here I'm creating the rainbow lollipop. I began with a piece of white clay and then I just placed some thin coils of rainbow clay around. And then these are the same colors that I actually used for the ice cream. I rolled this out on my work surface to make it into a longer coil, and the reason that I added the white clay was so that the colors would be separated with a little white strip in between them. I found that I didn't end up adding enough of the white clay, so all the rainbow colors are actually touching each other. So if I were to make the lollipop again, I would make that initial coil of white clay much thicker. Then to create the lollipop, I twisted the coil to swirl the colors, and then I just placed it on my work surface and wrapped it around into a circle shape. I also decided just to make some regular straight lollipops as well. Next up I'm making the strawberry. So for this one I'm using some red polymer clay, which I shaped into a little cone, and then I'm just adding some indents in the clay with my dotting tool to kind of look like the little seeds. To finish off my strawberry, I also attached on some green pieces of clay for the leaves. Next, we need to make the cookie. So to do this, I flattened down a piece of vanilla colored clay, and then I added some little choc chip pieces, which are just some pre-baked and cut pieces of brown clay. I kind of pushed these into the clay, and then I also used a little foil ball and I added some texture. Then of course I also added my shading with some brown chalk pastels and a fluffy paintbrush. Lastly, it's time to add all the little bits and pieces onto the ice cream. So I began with the largest swirly lollipop, and then I added the cookie on the other side along with the strawberry, and I ended up placing the 2 straight lollipop sticks behind the cookie, which did help them stand up a little bit better. Then off camera, I rolled some small balls of brown colored clay to kind of look like little chocolate pieces or Maltesers, I'm not exactly sure what they are, and I just placed these around into the white liquid clay. You can also decorate the chocolate sauce on the waffle cone if you would like. I actually ended up adding some little rainbow polymer clay sprinkles, and I just placed these around into the brown liquid clay. Then you can go ahead and add an eye pin if you would like to make it into a charm, and bake it in your oven according to your package's instructions. Lastly, to finish off my ice cream charms, I'm taking some super glue and I'm pulling out the eye pins and securing them back in with the super glue. Optionally, you can also glaze your charms if you would like to. I'm just adding some glaze to mine, but only on the sauce kind of parts so that they look shiny and the rest of the charms look more realistic. So here are what the 4 finished ice cream charm designs look like. These designs are of course very decorated and quite extra compared to the ice creams that I made in my previous tutorial, but it's always a lot of fun to play around with the different toppings and colors and designs, so I really like the way that these turned out. If you enjoyed this polymer clay tutorial, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, and also subscribe to my channel for lots more crafty videos, and I will see you next time. Bye guys!